Dad, perfect revenants. I had just walked out of my attorney's office feeling like the luckiest man alive. My older brother Norman had left me everything: Blackwater Ridge, his cattle ranch outside Bozeman, Montana, a rental duplex on Colfax Avenue in Denver, and $748,300 sitting in a Charles Schwab account. I remember sitting in my truck in the parking lot, just staring at the paperwork, thinking about how Norman used to call me the careful one and him the lucky one, and how strange it was that his luck had finally run out and mine had just begun. I couldn't wait to get home and tell my wife Dorothy and my son Eugene. I pictured us celebrating, maybe driving up to see the ranch together for the first time as a family. But when I pulled into the driveway and walked up to the front door, I heard their voices coming from the kitchen before I even got my key in the lock. And something about the tone made me stop with my hand still on the doorknob. My name is Walter Bregman. I'm 68 years old, and for 31 years I worked as a forensic accountant at Kessler and Nash in Denver, most of that time investigating insurance fraud on behalf of Meridian Mutual. I spent my career finding the small inconsistency in a stack of numbers that told the real story underneath: the padded invoice, the fake vendor, the claim that didn't add up if you looked closely enough. I thought I'd left all that behind when I retired 6 years ago. I never imagined I'd need those skills inside my own house. 8 months before that day at the attorney's office, I'd had what my doctor called a TIA, a mild stroke. I recovered well, but I'd had a few lapses since then, forgetting where I put my glasses, repeating a question I'd already asked. Small things, the kind of thing that happens to plenty of 68-year-olds. But Dorothy had started mentioning them more than seemed necessary. To me, to our neighbors, even once to my own daughter Claire from my first marriage. At the time, I thought she was just worried about me. I didn't understand yet that she was building a file. Dorothy came into my life 11 years ago, 2 years after my first wife, Helen, passed from ovarian cancer. Dorothy was warm and funny and good to me during a time I badly needed someone to be good to me, and I married her without ever asking enough questions about her first marriage. I knew her first husband, a man named Richard Sallies, had died of heart failure back in Colorado Springs. I knew there'd been some kind of dispute with his family afterward about his estate. I never dug deeper than that because I loved her, and because digging into people you love felt like a betrayal of its own kind. I would come to regret that particular kindness. Standing in the hallway that afternoon, I heard Eugene's voice first. My son is 34, works in commercial real estate, and has never quite forgiven me, I think, for not being wealthy enough fast enough for his taste. Once Coyle files the petition and Havorson signs off, Dad won't even know what hit him, he was saying. Norman's money is basically ours at that point. The house too, eventually. Dorothy's voice answered, low and steady, the same voice she used when she was closing a real estate deal of her own. Just stay calm at dinner Sunday. We tell him it's paperwork for the ranch, nothing more. He signs, and it's done before he even understands what he signed. I stood there in my own hallway in my own house and felt something in my chest go very quiet and very cold. 31 years of reading fraud in other people's handwriting, and here it was in my kitchen, in the voices of the two people I trusted most. I didn't walk in. I backed out the front door as quietly as I'd come in, sat in my truck for 11 minutes by the dashboard clock, and made myself breathe. Then I drove 3 blocks to the house of my old friend Harold Briggs. Harold had spent 26 years with the Denver Police Department, the last 9 of them in financial crimes, before he retired. We'd worked adjacent cases more than once over the years, his badge and my calculator chasing the same liars from different directions. He poured 2 coffees, sat across from me at his kitchen table, and let me talk without interrupting once. When I finished, he sat back and rubbed his jaw for a long moment before he said anything at all. "First thing," Harold said, "you don't confront them, not yet, not until you have paper, not feelings. Feelings get thrown out in a courtroom, paper doesn't." He wrote 3 names on a napkin: Dr. Havorson, Attorney Patricia Coyle, and the word petition underlined twice. "Find out what these are. Quietly, act normal at home. You were an investigator for 31 years, Walter. Investigate. And write everything down with a date and a time, even if it feels stupid." especially if it feels stupid. He also gave me a warning I didn't fully appreciate until later. People like this don't just try once, he said. If the first plan doesn't work fast enough, they'll have a second one ready. Watch for that too. I thought at the time he was just being thorough. I'd learn exactly what he meant. Over the next 19 days, I did exactly that. I started with small things. I noticed Dorothy's briefcase, usually left open on the hall table, was now always zipped shut. I noticed a new lock had appeared on the file cabinet in the study, one I didn't have a key to. I noticed a receipt in the recycling bin from a shredding service downtown, dated the same week Norman's estate cleared probate. I called Dr. Marcus Havorson's office myself, using the excuse that I wanted to confirm my upcoming appointment, a fishing expedition Harold had suggested. The receptionist cheerfully confirmed I had a neuropsychological evaluation scheduled for the following Tuesday at 2:15. I had never made that appointment. I had never spoken to Dr. Havorson in my life. I hung up the phone and sat in my study for a long time, staring at the calendar on my desk, at a Tuesday that already had a lie written into it before I'd even lived it. Then I found the bank statements. Dorothy and I shared a joint account at Colorado First National, one we mostly used for household bills. Going back through 6 weeks of statements online, I found 4 transfers I hadn't authorized, totaling $41,200, moved into an account under the name D. Vance, Dorothy's maiden name, at a credit union I'd never heard of in Aurora. Each transfer had gone out on a Friday afternoon, always under $3,000 per transaction until the fourth one, which had jumped to just under $15,000. As if whoever was moving the money had grown bolder or more impatient as the weeks went on. I printed everything at the library instead of at home, using a flash drive Harold had given me, because by then I no longer trusted our home printer's memory or myself to remember to clear it. I built a folder the way I used to build them for Meridian Mutual, chronological, tabbed, every document dated in pencil in the corner the moment I found it. Norman used to tease me for being the careful one. For the first time in my life, I understood what that carefulness was actually for. One evening during that stretch, I overheard a second conversation, this one shorter and colder than the first. Dorothy was on the phone in the garage, and I caught only a few lines through the door before she noticed the porch light and lowered her voice. "If he gets suspicious before Coyle files, we move to Plan B," she said. "Eugene can co-sign as next of kin if I can't." I didn't know yet what Plan B meant, and the not knowing frightened me more than anything I'd found so far. The hardest evening was the Tuesday I was supposed to be at Dr. Havorson's office, and instead sat in my truck outside a coffee shop 3 miles from the clinic. Watching through the window as Dorothy and attorney Patricia Coyle sat together at a corner table with a manila folder between them. I couldn't hear what they said, but I photographed the folder's label through the glass with my phone's zoom. In Ray, petition for guardianship, Walter A. Bregman. 2 nights later, I found Eugene's phone left charging on the kitchen counter while he showered, and I am not proud of what I did next. But I photographed 6 text messages between him and Dorothy before I put the phone back exactly where I'd found it. One line from Dorothy stuck with me longest. "Once he's declared incompetent, I control the trust. Eugene, this is the only shot we get at Norman's money. Walter would never give it to us free and clear. You know how tight he is." Eugene had answered with a single word. "Agreed," reading that. Standing alone in my own kitchen at 11 at night, I understood something I hadn't let myself understand before. This wasn't really about me being sick or forgetful. This was about money that had never belonged to them, and it was about 2 people who had decided, somewhere along the way, that I was an obstacle rather than a father and a husband. During those 19 days, I had to sit across the dinner table from both of them and talk about ordinary things. Eugene's job, Dorothy's garden. Whether the Broncos had a shot this season, while carrying what I knew like a stone in my coat pocket. I learned to nod at the right moments and laugh at the right jokes, all while running numbers in my head. $41,200, 4 transfers, 1 fabricated doctor's appointment. 1 folder on a coffee shop table. It was the strangest kind of loneliness, sitting at my own table surrounded by my own family and feeling like the only honest person in the room. The hardest moment came on a Thursday, when Dorothy reached over and squeezed my hand at dinner and said, gently, "You've seemed a little foggy lately, Walter. I just want to make sure we take care of things properly, that's all." I said, "Of course, dear," and meant none of it, and hated how easily the lie came to me after so many years of being married to her. 2 days after that, Eugene stopped by unannounced, which he rarely did, and sat with me on the back porch for almost an hour talking about nothing in particular, his job. An old fishing trip we'd taken to the Cache La Powder when he was 15, whether I'd been sleeping all right. I understood only later that he'd been sent to observe me, to report back on whether I seemed sharp or slipping, and the realization that my own son had been dispatched to study me like a subject in one of my old fraud files was the closest I came, in those 19 days, to losing my composure entirely. I remember gripping the porch railing until my knuckles went white after his car pulled away, and then going inside and writing down, in pencil, the date and the hour, because Harold had told me to, and because it was the only thing that kept my hands from shaking. Harold connected me with a detective from the Denver DA's Elder Abuse Unit, a sharp, no-nonsense woman named Renata Ibarra, who reviewed everything I'd gathered, the shredding receipt, the fabricated appointment, the unauthorized transfers, the guardianship petition, the text messages, and told me I had, in her words, about as clean a paper trail as I've seen in 11 years working these cases. She warned me, too, that a case like this could take months to build properly, that rushing it would only give a defense attorney room to argue the whole thing away as a family misunderstanding. The strongest cases, she said, are the boring ones, dates, numbers, receipts. No drama until the very end. She asked me one question that I still think about. Had Dorothy's first husband's death ever been formally investigated? I told her what little I knew. She wrote it down without comment, and I didn't think about it again until much later. Sunday came, the day of the dinner Dorothy had mentioned in that kitchen conversation 19 days earlier, the one where they planned to hand me papers to sign for the ranch. I hosted it myself this time. At my house, with a folder of my own sitting under a dish towel on the sideboard, and Detective Ibarra parked 2 houses down, waiting for my call. Dorothy brought out a folder after the pot roast, sliding it toward me with a smile I recognized now as the same smile she used to close real estate deals. "Just a few signatures, Walter. Nothing complicated. It'll make managing the ranch and the account so much easier for all of us." Eugene nodded along, not quite meeting my eyes. I didn't sign. I opened my own folder instead and laid the pages out one at a time, the way I used to lay out evidence for Meridian Mutual's fraud panel 30 years ago, calm, unhurried, letting the paper do the talking. The $41,200 moved to the D. Vance account. The neuropsychological evaluation I'd never attended. The photograph of the guardianship petition on Patricia Coyle's table. The text message where Dorothy had written in her own words that once I was declared incompetent, she would control the trust. "I know what you two have been building," I said. "I just built the same case from the other side for a living for 31 years. You should have remembered who you married, Dorothy." Dorothy's face went white, then hard. "You don't understand what it's like," she said, her voice cracking in a way I'd never heard before. "Watching you inherit all that money and knowing you'd never share it fairly, we were desperate, Walter." Eugene said nothing at all at first. Just stared at the folder like it might rearrange itself into something less damning if he looked at it long enough. Then quietly, almost to himself, he said, "I told her this was a bad idea. I told her." It didn't sound like an apology. It sounded like a man trying to write his own alibi in real time, and it told me everything I needed to know about how deep his participation had actually gone. I called Detective Ibarra in from her car. She read Dorothy her rights at my own dining table, and I remember thinking absurdly. That Norman's pot roast recipe, the one Dorothy had made that very night, would forever be tied in my memory to the sound of Miranda warnings being read over the same tablecloth we'd used for Thanksgiving for 11 years. Dorothy was charged with attempted fraud, forgery of the fabricated appointment records, and elder financial exploitation under Colorado statute. Eugene was charged as an accomplice. After 4 months of legal maneuvering by an attorney he could barely afford, he pleaded to a lesser charge of criminal facilitation, paid $18,000 in restitution, and was sentenced to 3 years probation and 100 hours of community service. Dorothy fought the charges for 11 months, first through Patricia Coyle, who quickly withdrew from representing her once her own name surfaced as a potential co-conspirator, and then through a public defender, before finally pleading guilty to 2 felony counts. She avoided prison in exchange for full restitution of the $41,200, 5 years probation, and a permanent injunction preventing her from acting as power of attorney or guardian for any elderly relative in the state of Colorado. What I didn't expect was the phone call from Detective Ibarra 8 months later. Her inquiry into Richard Sallies' death, the first husband I'd never asked enough questions about, had led investigators in Colorado Springs to reopen his file. There had been a life insurance payout of $210,000 after his death, filed less than 3 weeks after the funeral, and questions about the timeline of his final cardiologist visit that had never quite added up. As far as I know, that case remains open today, and I've made my peace with the fact that I may never learn the whole truth of the marriage that came before mine. I filed for divorce the week after that Sunday dinner. The proceedings took 9 months, complicated by the criminal case running alongside it. But in the end, I kept the house, sold the Denver duplex for $360,000, and kept Blackwater Ridge whole. I drove up to Montana myself for the first time that autumn alone, and stood at the edge of Norman's North pasture for the better part of an hour before I could bring myself to walk the rest of the property. I've spent the 2 years since turning it into a working cattle operation with a handful of guest cabins, something I think Norman, who always said money should smell like hay and diesel instead of sitting in an account doing nothing, would have approved of. Eugene and I speak twice a year now at most, his birthday, and a stiff phone call around the holidays. I've made peace with the distance between us in a way I never expected to, though I won't pretend it doesn't still ache some nights. My daughter Claire, from my first marriage to Helen, had drifted from me over the years in ways I only later understood Dorothy had quietly encouraged, one small comment at a time, so that I'd have fewer people in my corner if things ever came to a head. Claire moved back to Colorado 18 months ago with her husband and their 2 kids, and they come up to the ranch most summers now. Watching my grandchildren chase each other across the same pasture Norman used to walk with me as boys is, I think, the closest thing to justice I've actually found in all of this. I think about that hallway a lot, the 11 minutes I sat in my truck before I let myself feel anything at all, and the 19 days after that where I had to smile at a dinner table while carrying the truth in my coat pocket like a loaded gun I hoped I'd never have to use. I learned that 31 years of chasing other people's lies had prepared me, without my ever asking for it, to survive the one lie closest to home. I learned that the people who know you best are also the people best equipped to hurt you, if it ever comes to that, and that loving someone is never quite the same thing as being safe with them. Blood might share your last name, but it doesn't share your conscience. And trust, I've come to understand, was never a gift you give once and forget about. It's a debt people have to keep earning every single day, for as long as you let them stay close enough to hurt you.